Hey, all my friends and followers on YouTube, Father Ian Van Heusen here. I've been playing around with this live format. I think there's a lot of benefits to it. It gives you just opportunity to kind of flesh out topics. And what I'm thinking of doing with YouTube, and I'd be curious, I'm really trying to focus on learning each kind of avenue of social media. And I really do think perhaps what folks might want and be interested on YouTube is kind of longer discussions. I'm going to still post the other content. Tim handles that. But what I'm also going to do is maybe from time to time do live videos where it's a little bit of a longer content. And just I really want to try to focus also on interacting with folks. I see somebody kind of joined us. I appreciate you kind of tuning in. Let me just a little thing kind of popped up there. So what I wanted to get into today was the mindfulness, Catholic mindfulness. Now, so a lot of feedback. There's a lot of folks there's a lot of confusion. There's some critics of mindfulness, which I can totally understand. I can appreciate. I do think they're wrong, and I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But I want to start off with, so a lot of folks, they kind of try to jump right to church documents. So there's several documents that are kind of important on this discussion on Catholic mindfulness. So the one that a lot of people tend to draw their attention to, I'm going to pull it up here. I got my computer right here. I'm going to pull it up. Is Christ the bearer of the waters, is I believe what the document is called. So let me pull it up. Christ, the bearer of life, I think. Oh, Christ, let me pull it up real quick. Christ, the bearer of the water of life. It's about the New Age. So that's one of the first documents. Now, I think the challenge is a lot of times when people hear mindfulness, they tend to conflate a bunch of different things. So they say Buddhism, Hinduism, yoga is the same as New Age. Now, of course, the document does mention yoga. That's a little bit of another issue. But this particular document is a narrow focus on New Age stuff. So that's incredibly important to keep in mind. Anything it discusses is within the context of New Age. So, for example, Hinduism actually would fall under a different document, and a document that actually even trumps this document a little bit more. And I'm going to kind of get into more, but I just want to kind of review a little bit of the documents. And so when people say, well, in Christ, the bearer of the water of life, is a refutation of mindfulness. First of all, when the document was written, nobody was even talking about mindfulness at the time, and it wasn't considered. Now, of course, New Age folks do pick up on mindfulness, which is why I think sometimes we have to be wary of secular mindfulness or folks who are promoting mindfulness outside of the Catholic Church, which one of the things I've talked about a lot is that's why we need the work of Dr. Bottaro, and we need the work, hopefully, of myself as well, is because we need to be able to utilize some of these benefits within the Catholic fullness. So another document that relates. This one is a little bit controversial in some circles, but it's more definitive and much more of an important document, which is Nostra Aetate. I'm going to pull it up real quick just to kind of... So Nostra Aetate is one of the really important documents of the Second Vatican Council, the church relation to non-Christian religions. And what it gets into in that document is that the church recognizes all that is good, true, and beautiful in non-Christian religions. So the church talked about the emphasis, talked about relationship with other Christian denominations, but then also with non-Christian religions such as Hinduism and Buddhism. And it really does sing the praises of a lot of these religions. Now, I do want to think we need to start to make a distinction that I want to make off the bat, is there's a difference between non-revealed religions before Jesus Christ. So Hinduism and Buddhism develop in a culture that had not really heard the gospel. Now you might be able to say like Hinduism, they had the opportunity to accept Jesus through the Eastern rites, Syrio-Malabar and the Syrio-Malankar, but for the most part, most of the developments in Hinduism happened before Jesus Christ. It's an ancient religion. So it's about converting people who haven't heard the gospel. When we're talking about New Age, particularly in the Western context, which is what it comes out of, the New Age, oh, you know what? I need to plug in my phone. We'll just keep going. If it dies, it dies. So the New Age is is really a heresy, properly speaking. It comes out of Christianity. And so heresy, it's not like that we burn people at the stake or kind of thing. The idea of heresy more is that it's an error, a deviation from the Catholic religion. So with Buddhism and Hinduism, we talk about them as being non-revealed religions, and many of the theologians like St. Thomas Aquinas would talk about natural theology or natural religion. This is a very important concept in scholasticism. They would see it a lot when they looked at things like Aristotle and Plato. So kind of continuing on. So Nostra Aetate, that's the second document that we need to look at. The last one, which is one of my favorites, is one written by Pope Benedict before he was Pope Benedict. Letter to the bishops of the Catholic Church on some aspects of Christian religion, meditation. This is an important document, which actually Dr. Pietaro cites in his book on Catholic mindfulness and in his course on Catholic mindfulness. What it is important is that it talks about that methods from non-Christian religions shouldn't be automatically rejected simply because they're non-Christian. It actually says that in the document. But it cautions, and this is where Dr. Pietaro's work is incredibly important. There has to be a Christocentric dimension to all authentic prayer. What does this mean? It has to be grounded in a relationship with Jesus Christ. And also, it doesn't overlook the humanity of Christ. That's a slightly side issue that can be a little bit hard to parse out. But it has to be Christocentric. So those are the three documents. You can look back through it. By the way, if anybody's listening, feel free to shoot questions or shoot holes. Let's just kind of continue this conversation. I do love these interactions. Now, so those are some of the documents. Now, what I want to get into, this is a problem with a lot of folks who are critics of mindfulness, is we have to establish what I call a theological narrative. In the Catholic religion, in the Catholic faith, there's a clear theological narrative in which we can understand mindfulness, and we even understand Buddhism and Hinduism and Buddhist meditation and that. So some of the folks are starting to hint at this, where they'll say, like, for example, that mindfulness can lead to demonic possession. The problem with that is it creates a really problematic relationship between nature and grace. So they would say, like, for example, that some of the studies show that it's only mildly good for you. I think they may also be misunderstanding social sciences and research. I would be curious Dr. Pietaro's take on that. But with that, even if it's mildly good for you, like if it's not like the greatest thing in the world, I find that hard to believe, though, because just my own experience from prayer and meditation, the incredible benefits that have taken place in my life, and you can kind of even feel the natural benefits. You can feel yourself calm down when you integrate mindfulness into things. So I find that hard to believe on an experiential level. But the problem is with nature and grace is that things won't be good for you on a natural level and then suddenly be like demonic. The demonic is very clear. It's an entry of a foreign agent who wants to destroy you and wants to enslave you. Now, natural goods can be abused, and I would not be surprised if some exorcists have experienced things where, like, for example, somebody who had a wounded past, for example, had a troubled relationship with their parents or had made a pact with the devil, and they were seeking peace. And so they went to mindfulness to try to find peace in the midst of all that trouble, and it kind of just led down a rabbit hole. I could completely understand that. But I don't think any exorcist, from my understanding, and I studied this stuff in seminary as well, we studied this stuff, I don't think they would say that like somebody was 100% healthy and then they went and they sat and was aware of their body and practiced mindfulness for 20 minutes and bam, they were possessed. Like, that seems a little bit ridiculous. And when people kind of imply that, it's like, that's pretty ridiculous. But what else? So when we talk about a theological narrative, there's a whole system in which the way you do theology. So you start with the Old Testament, you start with the you move to the New Testament, you start with Thomas Aquinas. There's a whole progress, and we're taught a theological methodology. I do believe that my theological narrative of the idea of mindfulness as a natural human good, which can be oriented towards Christ, or it can be abused because it's a natural human good. I think that provides a good theological narrative to understand, yes, there can be problems with mindfulness, but then there can also be great benefits. Now, I also say in that context, I don't believe mindfulness actually adds something new to the Catholic Church. I think it helps us to reevaluate and to understand the fullness which is found within the Catholic Church. So I talk about St. Ignatius of Loyola and his exercises. He gives an exercise on the five senses. It's in the appendices. Discernment as well, the bodily side of discernment. I really wish I had the time to research it all, but like the Hesychasts and the Orthodox Church, many things that they do are similar to mindfulness. And I would even say that if you did your research on it, I think Archbishop Callistus Ware, I mentioned it in a few emails, he tended to agree with me, but he just didn't have the time to kind of flesh it out. I kind of wish I could have that further conversation with him. But he kind of agrees that he sees a lot of mindfulness in the Philokalia and in the Hesychast tradition. So finally, also St. Thomas Aquinas, understanding of the passions. So this idea that the emotions are tied to the body and that we have to still and educate the emotions through intentional effort is very Thomistic as well. All of this stuff makes sense. It's like the more I study it, it's like this is a reasonable thing. Perhaps that bodily dimension was lost in Western Christianity precisely because of the Enlightenment. So post-Enlightenment, I've talked about this with a lot of theologians, and they tend to agree with me. There was an emphasis in the West on reason and logic. And in fact, some books talk about how the feminine was devalued in the West, not because of Christianity, but because of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment said, we don't need our emotions, we need reason detached from our emotions. Catholicism always holds that tension of the whole together, but the Enlightenment didn't quite get that. So, but Catholicism was influenced. In response to Protestantism, in response to the Enlightenment, we tried to be more rational, more intellectual. And so that's where I think right now the mindfulness thing helps us to reconnect with the tradition, particularly on the role of the body and the role of the emotions. Not just feeling strong emotions, but that educating of the passions. That's a phrase that a sister that I worked with talked about a lot. So this has been a good little live session. Please leave comments. I'm looking to maybe do these live sessions a little bit more where I kind of unpack. Maybe I might even do some commentaries on works. But I hope you've enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, and I got to figure out the best way to kind of promote on each avenue. Each little social media platform has its own little intricacies, and you have to learn it. But it's kind of fun. It's kind of a fun challenge. So thank you for listening, and I've appreciated this time with you guys. God bless.